want to go over some of the music. I can't go through every successful song.
Please don't.
Now, Dialogue was written as a duet, was it?
Yeah.
Let's discuss what the song's about.
It's a discussion between two young people, two college age people. One of them is
politically oriented.
Politically, caught up in the changes of what was going on, the war in Vietnam, getting people registered to vote in the South. And the other person was another student who was more straight-laced. Actually, worse than that, he was just not connected at all with what was going on in the world. And so that's what the dialogue's about.
When you first heard Dialogue, do you think it would make it?
I didn't know. I just liked playing it. And but the most amazing thing is I probably fit into the kid who didn't really care much about doing anything at school. And I was always like the C student, that type of guy. And I wasn't really politically involved, whereas Robert was. So.
Now tell me about 25 or 6 to 4. How did that come about?
For a while, we were the house band on the off nights at the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA. We had already moved to LA, and we were already kind of gigging around. The first album had been successful, and I was living up the street from the Whiskey in a rented house with some other kids who had come from Chicago out to LA. And I had a piano set up in a room in that house. So coming home one night from the Whiskey, I was just kind of unwinding. I sat down at the piano and started playing something like the famous riff from the song 25 or 6 to 4, which had no name and had no lyrics yet. And I just kind of fooled around with it for, maybe half an hour, looked out over the city of Hollywood, looking at the lights on the tall buildings. So that was like flashing lights against the sky lyric. But I couldn't figure out what the song was going to be about. I looked across the room, and there was an old grandmother's clock on the wall. I couldn't quite make out what the time was, but the hands on the clock were somewhere around 25 or 26 to 4 a.m. And I just began to just jot down what the hell I was doing there. And I thought, well, for now, I'm just going to describe the process of writing this song, and I'll figure out what the lyrics are going to be later. But I didn't need to. So once I laid out the grid and I figured out what the chorus was, I took it into rehearsal. I think it was maybe the next day. We were rehearsing at the Whiskey during the day, and I played it for some of the guys, and I said, "This is a new song. What do you think?"
Do you remember the first time you heard it?
No, not exactly, but I remember rehearsing at the Whiskey and that being, of course, one of the songs that we did. And amazingly enough, 50 plus years later, it's one of the many songs that we can't get out of a venue without playing.
Well, and that reminds me, we rack forward a number of years, and 25 or 6 to 4 became a favorite song of Alex Schachter, one of the victims of the Parkland school shooting. How did you get involved with a group calling itself Safe Schools for Alex?
That actually, I think that came through our manager, Peter Chiavarelli. And I had seen the footage of Max Schachter, Alex's father. I don't know whether it was the city council in their town or whether he'd gone all the way to Washington, but I saw him just raising hell. I mean, standing up and saying, how could this happen?
Well, you seemed obviously moved by this.
Yeah.
Something you feel very strongly about?
I do. And so what Max Schachter came up with was trying to find a way to inspire the school systems to spend at least a fraction of the money that we've spent at airports to ensure security as we're traveling, form some similar way to keep the schools secure, so that couldn't happen again.
Well, the music that was created a long time ago resonates with a whole new generation.
That's always amazed us, that the same music that we wrote way back when resonates with each new generation. It's always amazed me. I mean, dialogue, the lyrics in dialogue make as much sense today as they did when Robert wrote them.
When the disco phenomenon hit during the 1970s, did you find yourself saying, wow, this disco stuff is really taking over all the radio play, maybe we need to do a little disco kind of music, or did you do that?
And we did. We did one disco mix of a pretty good song.
Right at the end of the disco period.
Right at the end. Our timing was awful.
And that song was?
Street Player, a song called Street Player. It went nowhere, but oddly enough, about 10 years later, we were touring in Japan, and I was maybe having a sushi dinner, but I heard a remix, a DJ remix of that song. And then I realized, wait a minute, that is us, but in a different, sampled and completely rejiggered. So we now perform that song, but we perform a rearrangement of the dance mix arrangement of a disco song.